Hello and welcome to the Silver King's War. I'm Michael Sievers, the writer, producer, and creator of this podcast series about my father's Second World War as a B-26 bombardier. Today we're in Who is Della, the fourth and final play in this podcast series. And we're in Act 1, which is called Prominent Patient, and this is Scene 4, Pasadena. It begins with Michael, the narrator, who is Stanley's son. The scene in early May of 1956 is the Huntington Memorial Hospital corporate suite in Pasadena, California. James Sheppard, Frank Simpson, Frank Ober Jr., and Stanley Silverfield are meeting with the hospital's chief executive officer, Dr. Laurie Mantle, and the chief medical officer, Dr. Philip Mann, a UCLA professor of psychiatry. They are discussing the treatment plan for Della Martin. Her release from Patton State Hospital is predicated on the setting for her recovery within the hospital's residential structure. Sheppard, Simpson, and William Bunn, while working on Della Martin's release, had a series of meetings with Dr. Mantle and Dr. Mann about her recovery and treatment. And now the lawyers have completed the process to release Della from the state hospital. If the residential treatment is successful, Della will live in a private home with a full-time companion. Her estate has a value of about $10 million. Michael continues. Huntington Memorial Hospital opened in 1892, 10 years after Della's birth in 1883, and 1 year before Patton State Hospital opened in 1893. The hospital will remain a significant part of the Martin family history in California. When Della died in 1974, 1/3 of her estate provided funds to convert the hospital's former maternity ward and develop the 55-bed Della Martin Center for Behavioral Services for residential inpatient care. Della Martin's transition in the mid-1950s from 45 years in a state asylum to a private life seems in the year 2021 an extraordinary achievement. It was remarkable and required an extensive team that supported her throughout 20 years to 1974, when she died at 90. Huntington Memorial Hospital was an important and historic facility in Pasadena. However, its designation as the residential setting for Della Martin's rehabilitation was a new and negotiated role in the mental health community. The medical experts, led by Dr. William Bunn, hired by James Sheppard and Frank Simpson to support Della's release and care, developed a rehabilitation plan that was precedent-setting for the era. The life expectancy for someone who was declared mentally ill in 1910 and placed in a California state asylum was 10 to 15 years. Della Martin was 28 when she entered Patton State Hospital and 74 when she was officially declared stable and released after 45 years. The context for Della Martin's release, rehabilitation, and life within a community setting is complex and possible if each aspect of her life after Patton State Hospital works. The meeting of 7 professionals sitting around the table includes 3 lawyers, 3 physicians, and 1 aeronautical engineer, and begins with introductions. As the lights go up on this scene, which is historic, the meeting is led by James Sheppard, and he begins. Good morning, Dr. Mantle and Dr. Mann. Please meet the additional members of Della Martin's team, Frank Ober Jr. and Stanley Silverfield. Mr. Ober is Glenn Martin's attorney, and Mr. Silverfield is his personal representative. Laurie Mantle, the hospital CEO. Good morning, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Ober and Mr. Silverfield, and the chief medical officer, Dr. Philip Mann. Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to Huntington Memorial. This is the lead psychiatrist, William Bunn. Dr. Mann, will you describe the transition and treatment plan for Della Martin. And Philip Mann begins, "Of course, Dr. Bunn, it is likely that Della's first weeks in the residential hospital setting and the transition months that follow as she moves into the community will expose the decades and depth of institutionalization hurdles confronting Della." And the Silver King, "Could you please elaborate on that, Dr. Mann?" And the chief medical officer responds, "Well, Mr. Silverfield, even in the most aware and prepared residential recovery environment, Della would experience confusion and anxiety about initial unfamiliar encounters and stimuli. Think of her adjustments to the hospital staff, visitors, and access to personal, private resources within the residential suite. And as she begins to explore the hospital setting, the furniture, appliances, community spaces, and the other residents." The psychiatrist William Bunn, "Stanley, Della's transition within the hospital is based on her familiar historic patterns before introducing a wider world. A caring approach based on professional and family connections and care will allow Della to gradually negotiate, adapt, and embrace most of these old and new challenges. A path for Della's comfort in her new world may mean maintaining some quirky institutionalized behavior, such as only washing her hair on Wednesdays and Saturdays." This is James Sheppard. "Our meetings with the Patton psychiatric staff included the history of Della's care plan within the state hospital, and Dr. Mann was in those meetings." And this is the chief medical officer, Philip Mann. "Yes, we have discussed Della's personal strengths and the supportive resources within Patton. We know that Della has responded very well to her medication regimen. Her transition plan will maintain the current dose and schedule for the Thorazine. The Huntington staff will continue to communicate with the lead Patton psychiatrist and the new residential treatment psychiatric team throughout Della's full transition to our residential setting." This is Frank Ober, Jr. "Dr. Mann, please explain how Della's Patton residential history will affect her transition to Huntington and a private setting." Philip Mann responds, "Mr. Ober, Della's decades of life at Patton inform her treatment here. Given Della's abilities implied by the history of her 45 years of life at Patton will allow, after her release, to focus on the social behavioral skills she has demonstrated and how to maintain and build on them in residential treatment. Della's transition to private life may require 4 months or less based on her personal resources, including Stanley's advocacy and guardianship, the wealth and available home care support, and her capabilities combined with medication management based on the evidence of her many successful post-discharge years of community life. There will be therapy and psychological educational resources to build her skills and approximate community life comparable to her greater freedom on the hospital grounds." And the Silver King, inquiring of Dr. Mann, "Dr. Mann, what are examples of her skills right now?" Philip Mann responds, "Well, Stanley, we know how much Della enjoys reading, movies, and organizing her hospital unit peers for weekly card games. We know that Della developed a sustained fascination with World War II, politics, and flower gardens on the Patton grounds. The treatment plan here will include expanding her interests and community involvement to develop better behavioral and communication skills. And steps within the plan will introduce appliances, including music, television, and automobiles, pets, visitors, shopping trips, and outings to movies and restaurants. And the hospital CEO, Lori Mantle, inquires, Philip, what about Della's risk factors in our residential setting? And Dr. Mann to Dr. Mantle, Lori, any physical, social, and emotional risk will be reviewed each day. Examples include an unsteady gait and poor balance, night fears, and other risks in the socialization process. Our thoroughness in the residential treatment plan for Della will help her improve skills and compensate for the emotional risks of her illness. Examples for her improvement will be interacting more with peers who have similar interests and skills, as well as available physical therapy and weekly individual therapy sessions. And James Sheppard, thank you and your team, Dr. Mann. We're pleased with your thoughtful, thorough approach. Dr. Bunn and his team's evaluation of Della's behavioral skills, combined with the Huntington treatment plan, are encouraging. We understand your predisposition to want to move more cautiously in developing the timetable for Della's transition to a private setting. Our team is clear that it may be easy to underestimate Della's ability to accept and thrive in the transition. And this is Della Martin, Glenn's sister, who steps from the shadows to stand beneath a single light as she speaks to the audience.
I met with Mr. Ober and Mr. Sheppard and young Stanley Silverfield. They were very nice. They explained that Glenn had provided money for me in his estate. The money would help me leave the hospital, if that was something I might consider. But where would I go? Dr. Gorecki explained that with help, the move would be similar to my stay at the Monterey Sanitarium in San Gabriel. The new place, Huntington Memorial Hospital in Pasadena, would provide more improved treatment. A difference may be that with success, I might be able to live in a private home with a full-time care companion. But with whom? Mr. Andriola said he thought I was ready to learn more about life. I think I am.
This is the end of Scene 4, Pasadena, in Act 1, A Prominent Patient, in the fourth play in our series, Who is Della? And you are listening to The Silver King's War.